Good evening, this is Edward with sonsofgod.com. It's Friday, November 28th, 2014. The word I want to bring is probably the deepest word on spiritual warfare that we've yet to present at the Sons of God website. I know that we have been working on a book called Spiritual Warfare. At this point, I don't know exactly when that will be completed, because we're not dealing with something that would be approached from the linear or mental scope of things. We're dealing with something that has to do with the realm of experience and a realm of abiding and a realm of maturity. If we were to go to school and, let's say, study to become a programmer, you would learn the concepts, the principles, and then you would get a job and you would apply them in your workspace. The topic about spiritual warfare is different because the level of abiding and the experience that comes with that level is the precursor for the teaching to come that will then begin to explain and illuminate what you've walked through. Otherwise, it's only teaching. So there's been a carefulness with respect to the book and exactly how the Lord intends to bring that teaching, because it's the scripture, in my Father's house are many dwelling places. There are many, many levels within the kingdom. And the sons are all at different levels of growth and maturity. But the time has come for this word to be presented, because it's a word that affects every one of the sons. Everyone that's called during this time, that has a mantle upon them to break through into the manifestation of sonship, is dealing with a level of conflict that they have not understood. There's been no real teaching on it, and it has to do with what I would call the satanic input. If you go back in history, you will see that all throughout the generations of man, there has been a satanic input ever since the time of Adam. When the angels, back in the book of Genesis, when the angels came and mixed among the women, and they took unto themselves women and they bore giants, that would be in the first few chapters of Genesis, that began something far more involved than we understand, because that brought a satanic input into that generation that began to propagate throughout history. In every generation, there has been the input, what I would call the satanic input, into that generation. At the time of Noah and the ark, Ham was the satanic input that made it through the ark and became the father of Nimrod and further down the line, Canaan. And so you have what began to unfold as a very unique satanic input in the generations that followed the days of Noah. And you could go back and read the curse that was upon Ham. But the issue is that when the flood came, it was God's intent to wipe out the iniquity, the evil that had become so prevalent. And yet that satanic input within Ham had found a point that stayed within him as he, went into the ark and continued a life, on the other side of the flood. We have to understand this is kind of an expansive topic when you start talking about the Nephilim and the satanic input in generations. But it's been, all the way down through the ages. When Moses walked, you had Korah that was a satanic input at that point. As Korah rose up against Moses and said, "Who are you to have the word only?" and turn the people against Moses. And so you have the spirit of Korah in the end time once again that comes to gainsay what God is doing. But there are many different levels of the satanic input that have continued down throughout the ages. Now, on the flip side, there's always been a remnant, the godly seed from generation to generation that has continued. Different ones that have, like Martin Luther, that have borne the torch of the day, that have stood up against the satanic input of their generation. For Luther, it was the Catholic Church, and it just continued because there has been a very strong presence down throughout our history. Now, in these days, it becomes an even greater issue because the satanic input has a level of access within humanity that has not been there before. By virtue of TV, the internet, the various forms of media, newspapers, there's a tremendous access that the satanic input has literally had into this current generation. I don't know that we really understand how extensive that input is into this generation. We've touched on this before, but the end goal of the satanic powers is the annihilation of the human race. And to that end, they have leveraged a great deal of power and control through the media and the governments. Literally just every venue that would have control, banking, it goes on and on. There's been a satanic input within all of these facets of our culture at this time, and that has been used to literally steer mankind down a course of action that would see no flesh literally saved alive, as Matthew speaks. That's the end game of the enemy, to see that happen. And so the satanic input during this time is probably the most prevalent that it has been, since the days of Noah, which of course has been prophesied. So we're talking about just an overview of what we're dealing with here during these days, and it becomes very, it could be a great concern because we're dealing with something more than just that which has control on a very broad and global scale. We're talking about something that has a very direct control and access to the sons as they begin to come forth and manifest. What I'd like to do is play a 12-minute clip from a word that came earlier in the day. Some of this may be a little bit duplicated, but it lays out a vision of something that we're dealing with that we haven't seen. And the greatest problem, during this time that the sons face is the problem of sight and the ability to discern literally the deep things of Satan as well as understanding the deep things of the kingdom. And the deep things of Satan are not what you think they are. We're talking about something so subtle that without a great deal of insight, you would not be able to discern the presence of Satan and that input. But this is something that the sons of God are facing. Everyone who is called to sonship at this time is facing a great level of conflict with the satanic input that is directly coming against them. So this 12-minute word will delve into explaining a little bit more of what we're talking about. I'd like to talk about the satanic input in this generation. This is something that, for the most part, is hidden from most people's eyes, because it takes a great deal of discernment to discern the presence of Satan and the presence of his sons and how he moves through those channels as well, that may not be sons, but they have inadvertently given their hearts over to darkness. In the days of Canaan, you had the men of renown, the giants in the land. That was the satanic input in that generation. There has always been both a satanic input within the generations of mankind throughout history, as there has been a godly input or remnant that have been in the earth, for a great deal of time. So you've always had those two inputs. You've had the godly input, and you've had the satanic input over the many different generations. What we face now at this time of the culmination of days is a much deeper presence of the satanic input, which, because of the technology, has become an issue that has never had to be dealt with before this time. Civilization was always relegated to, smaller areas and the inability of communicating. But that's been removed through the internet and television, the media, the newspapers, satellites. It's changed the playing field substantially in the last 100 years, and even the last 30 years. Things have changed substantially. The satanic input has deepened in the earth. Most of your popular, beloved people in the earth have a satanic input within their lives, and for that reason they have come to popularity, to the point of wealth, influence, and power. These things do not come at no cost. And so we've seen the satanic input continue to grow in the earth. Most all of your major newspapers are owned and controlled by the Nephilim. The media, the TV stations, the movie companies, the governments, the banking, just about on every level, the Nephilim and satanic input is present. And so things have become very interesting. Now that's on a very broad scale. And and some of that is, there have been, it's more easily to discern. But let's talk about something that's closer to home. And that would be the satanic input that is coming directly against the manifestation of the sons of God. Now, that is a completely different animal. You've got the satanic seed and input in the generation as a whole that is controlling and directing mankind, and literally, as I've said before, herding mankind into a conclusion that the satanic forces desire. But let's talk about the satanic input against the individual manifestation of the sons of God. This becomes very, very difficult to discern. This is where your real battle lies, even if you've not recognized it. And that's why we've spoken about the breaking of bonds and the absolute need to relate on a plane of spirit and move in the plane of spirit. Christ said he knew what was in man, and he gave himself to know man. Why was that? Because of the close connection between the mind and soul of man, which is enmity to God. It talks about how the mind is enmity. Well, the mind is the soul. And so if you take the spirit out of the equation for the moment and you look at the soul flesh of man and people, that pretty much is the backyard playing field of the satanic hosts, because the mind is at enmity to God and the soul wars against the spirit. You really don't have a revelation of how deep and how serious this is. I don't think any of us do. But we need to have a deeper revelation of how strong the soul is set to destroy the Christ coming forth. And that soul is resident within you. It is the Antichrist on a very real personal level. It is the problem that everyone faces. That gets very close and very personal. But the greater concern, as we have spoken before, has to do with bonds and relationships and coming up out of the realm of soul. Because that's where the satanic input is coming directly against the manifesting of the sons of God. It's not going to be through the devils and the demons. It's not going to be from the government and the media. They've already done their work in attempting to, and perhaps to some degree successfully, conditioning how you think, conditioning your paradigm. And we've spoken about getting out of the paradigms, getting out of the thinking of this age, because it's all been orchestrated by the satanic input in this generation on a very deep scale. We've gone over how the satanic input can control the minds of millions through the media, through what their desired, purpose is. That's a given. But what I'm talking about here is the manifesting of each son that comes forth during this time is battling the satanic input against them. The satanic input can be through the unregenerated soul, flesh of their own nature that has not gone to the cross. Or it can be through an association, family, friends, connections of the same situation. The unregenerated soul flesh is the breeding ground of the satanic input. And that's where Satan has his greatest ability to restrain and destroy what God is bringing forth. And the satanic input is very hard to discern because it can seem like everything is just great. You've got this connection, you've got these friends, your family, whatever. Everything is just great, but just at that point that the enemy is looking to bring a restraint, to hinder, he can move through the mind and the emotions and deception. Because as I've said, deception is prevalent in the realm of soul. Because it's all about the mind, the emotions, your paradigms. It's not as much an issue from the realm of spirit. But those that walk in the realm of soul are very prone to deception. That's why you have to get out of the soul. And the work of the cross has to be complete. And that's also how the enemy at the right time can take a relationship or a connection and can take some small little episode, event, whatever, blow it out of kilter until the person begins to react with such anger, hatred, or whatever other point. And at that point, the satanic input has access through the soul of that person. And all of a sudden, you're not dealing with warfare against an individual. You're dealing with warfare against the satanic input, against the Nephilim spirit. And that's a whole different dynamic, because the force of that is far greater than just someone who's having a bad day and got a little angry with you or something. You're talking about something that has a tremendous amount of power and leverage. And that is a concern. That's something that we face constantly. This is the warfare of the saints. This is something that people don't understand. There is not that much understanding, nor is there any teaching on this. And you say, well, how do you fight this off? You have to get into the Spirit. You have to go through the work of the cross, and you have to break those bonds. And if it's not real, then you're on your face before the Lord saying, Lord, reveal this word to me, and reveal to me, Lord, exactly what we're talking about here with the warfare of the soul versus the spirit. This is not a small thing. It's a very intense issue that all of the sons are facing now that are coming to birth. Not one is not under the gun or facing this specific issue. So the problem that we face during this time of the manifestation of the sons of God, during this window that is set before us of change, transformation, and growth. There's a great deal happening right now over the last several months. And it's all about bringing forth the sons. But with our eyes wide open, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Really understand. Our warfare is not with the blatant satanic powers, but it's the very subtle manifestation of the enemy as he finds contacts or points of access to you through relationships, contacts, whatever it is you have, that has not been dealt with in the Spirit, where the cross has not been complete, where there's that openness that you have to that relationship. And if rubbed the wrong way, all of a sudden, there's this reaction, and the enemy is able to piggyback on that reaction and bring against the sons a great deal of warfare. And you could say, well, exactly what does that mean? Well, it can manifest in many different ways, from strong physical assault, psychic, mental assault. But any of them, bottom line, is geared to take away your ability to see. That's really what he's looking for. Because if you see, you're able to change. If you are able to discern these deep things, then you're able to move with leverage and control over it. But I've seen this time and time again. Everything is just fine on a certain level with any given relationship. All of a sudden, something crosses over the line and you have no idea what you could have possibly done. But it was enough to just set something off, and you find yourself in a battle royal against a satanic input that wasn't there a moment ago. And yet you could come back a day from then, and it would be completely gone. You'd say, and so you think to yourself, I must be imagining this, because the satanic input can come and go just that easy through the unregenerated soul. It's looking for that point in time where it can piggyback upon the emotions and the deception and then come against you, to undermine you, to bring you down, to do anything that it can to get you to back away from pressing through the breakthrough that is set before you. So this is about what I want to say. And we're treading on territory that is a little difficult to explain. I hope that this has conveyed something to you, both an overview of what the satanic input is and how it has operated through our history, as well as the godly seed, the input of the godly seed, but more so for us to really understand at this juncture of time that the real warfare that we're facing is that unregenerated aspect within our own being that has not gone to the cross, and those soul bonds and relationships that we have not been able to let go of. We have not understood the jeopardy that those face. Doesn't matter if they're your children, grandchildren, it doesn't matter what it is. The playing field is pretty level here. But we need to really get a revelation when you read the scriptures and say, well, the soul wars against the spirit. Well, that's all fine. You go on to the next scripture. I already read that one. Let's go on to the next scripture. No, wait a second. Do you understand what Paul was saying? Do you grasp the real conflict here of the soul against the spirit? Your soul so set against your manifestation, and it wars against the spirit. And the only answer for the soul is the cross, the crucifixion of it. As Paul said, I die daily. And we've talked about the ascension of the spirit over the soul. All of that bringing you into a position where you're able to begin to really rightly discern and see. Because from that point, then you're going to find relationships that come out of the woodwork. And they could just be a moment in time here, a moment in time there. And the enemy is constantly looking to bring a satanic input to restrain and block the manifesting of the sons of God on a very individual level. This word needs to be experienced. I know that a lot of this may seem as theory, but I can tell you this is what you're facing more than you understand. And perhaps this will begin to confirm and illuminate what you've been going through and what some of this really is and what the end design has been for it. We bless this word to you. This is a very important word to grasp and to really understand if we're to move with leverage and control, authority and dominion. Amen.